I am Margaret Broadwell. I'm running for the North Carolina House in District 40. District 40 goes from Morrisville, where I live, all the way up to the north boundary line of the county and includes half of Wake Forest. And I'm running because somebody has to. I feel that there are so many policies that are now being created by the leadership, the supermajority leadership on the Republican side particularly, that are creating policies that are not helpful to many of our population. Our families are being hurt, some of our voting rights are being threatened, our environment is being targeted in negative ways, our education is hurting. We are spending less from the state treasury now than we did per student 15 years ago. And of all of those problems and many more, somebody has to step up and do things differently, do things truly for the public for which they serve. I think taxes are something that nobody wants to pay, me included, but it's necessary to be able to have the revenues that are necessary for providing services and infrastructure and clean water and so many issues that affect our families and everyday life. We have to look towards the future and have adequate funds to provide the necessary structure for our society, and I think that we all should pay a fair share. So when the ideal may be less taxes, I think we have to really examine that closely, because there's a balancing act always, from local government, from which I've come, all the way to the federal government. But we need common sense back, restored, and find ways to afford the things that are necessary to sustain our families and businesses. My experience has been not with the film industry per se, but with incentives, even at the local government level and with the local, county, and state help and partnerships, that incentives do really bring economic development to the region. And I think that's very necessary to sustain our positive progress forward in North Carolina. So I'm very much in favor of certain types of incentives. I think there's a misconception so many times with the public thinking that incentives means giving away their tax dollars, which are hard-earned and given to the state and other government entities. And that's not necessarily what an incentive is. In my local experience in Morrisville, for an example, we've had companies that have located in Morrisville because of some of the benefits they find from locating in Morrisville. And one of them would be a type of incentive help that we as a community offer certain types of businesses. Basically, they still pay the same taxes that they would normally, but if they meet certain benchmarks that have been pre-agreed upon, such as the amount that they would hire or the amount of business they bring into the community, etc., then they get a benefit of having part of their taxes that they have already paid reimbursed to them. So we get it first before we then give them a break. It's not something that we just say, here, there's thousands or millions of dollars we're going to suddenly give you if you come here. So it's a little bit of misunderstanding, I think, with some individuals thinking of what incentives truly are. And I do believe in certain types of incentives. I think it helps with the economic development, which helps us all. Oh, I'm absolutely 110% against fracking and offshore drilling in North Carolina. I understand also that the possibilities of fracking include Wake County. Wake County has now achieved a population of 1 million people officially, and there is no way and nowhere in Wake County, to my way of thinking, that fracking would even come close to being safe. I object to the way it was put into play. I was actually in the legislature on the day that the Senate convened to talk about fracking and fracking in North Carolina, and the behavior I was observing from the Republican leadership wanting the fracking to go forward was absolutely horrendous. I was just embarrassed to say that the individual carrying that forth was a member of our General Assembly. I don't mind anyone having differences of opinion. I think one should always be respectful, especially as an elected official, and personal insults being hurled against another viewpoint and the person bringing the other viewpoint is absolutely unacceptable. That needs to be changed, and if I had my say, it would be changed immediately. But we need new leadership up there in many respects for many different reasons, according to my view. And besides that, I think fracking has not been proven to be safe by any means. It runs the risk of the health and public safety. It runs the risk of damaging our environment, which may be irreparable if that should happen. And I just think the risk is far too high for what benefit we may get out of it when it goes forward. So if I had a vote, I would say absolutely no fracking in North Carolina. I don't see anywhere in North Carolina that would be something that a company wanting to frack would, a place where they would seek to be, I don't think is any place in North Carolina that would be safe at all. So I'm absolutely against that. The offshore drilling, I think we should go very, very cautiously, if at all, with that. I think our coastline is so pristine and already has some problems, and there's so much benefit to not having our shoreline deteriorate that I think that, again, is a huge risk. I much more am in favor of natural sources, whether it be electricity, whether it be wind, whether it be solar. I would much more be in favor of something that I feel is safe and productive at the same time. Well, that's the reason I'm running, is because I'm not happy with the performance of the supermajority. I'm not against Republicans. I have very good friends who are Republicans. We get along just fine, even if we talk politics. I've even had an individual who cannot vote for me come election day because she lives the wrong side of the new boundaries that have been created for the district. But she's a Republican. She's even given me a fundraiser. I've been door to door in Morrisville, particularly at the moment, and come across Republicans who have said, oh, absolutely, thank God you're running and that we have a choice. And so I'm feeling very good about Republicans in general, but the Republican leadership that's currently serving in our General Assembly is not treating our families well, not treating our environment well, not treating our education, and that is so important for all of us, for our families, for our citizens that need the tools to graduate with to be competitive in a global society. Here in Wake County especially, we have the Research Triangle Park, we have high income people, we have highly educated people, we have companies who deal with those types of employees and need a stable workforce. Our education and our trained workforce is what brings some of the companies to our region. And we need so much that's not being provided by the leadership currently in our General Assembly, and that has to change. If we keep doing the same things the same way, we're going to get the same results. That's an old but tried and true saying, and I think the only way is to change the leadership. And I'm trying to do my part to do that in a positive way. The first thing, because so many things come from it, that I think we have to refocus on is what we used to focus on, and that is our education, from the cradle to the grave practically, because we're living longer now. Even our seniors are going back and taking more college credits. We have a lot to give. We have a lot to receive here in North Carolina. But our education has to be the basis. We have to respect our teachers and award our teachers for the job they do. We have to make sure that we have the very best trained staff and teachers and administrative staff even in our schools. We need to have an environment that I have learned since this higher office that I'm seeking during this campaign season that I was not previously aware of, but our North Carolina Constitution says it's the state's main responsibility to provide good education for every child. And I'm afraid we have dropped the ball. We are paying less, as I think I have said earlier in this interview, per student in North Carolina now than we did 15 years ago. and that's absolutely unacceptable. We have to get education back on track. We have to pull together that we can do these things, but our leadership right now is not focusing on that as much as they are focusing on other things. And education has to be the basis. It has to be the basis of a productive society. It has to be the basis of economic development. It has to be the basis moving forward. So that would be my number one top priority, to get back on track. You know, I think transportation is something that's a statewide issue. Certainly it's been a paramount issue for years now, and continues to be, no matter how much we work towards handling that specific issue in Morrisville. But in Morrisville, most of our roads are state roads. So it requires a partnership between the state treasury and the State Department of Transportation and the local government. We've made great strides forward, and we've got road projects, private as well as partnership with the state, projects underway right now in Morrisville. But while it's, I thought was unique to Morrisville in Wake County, I have learned now, since Wake Forest is also in my district, that one of the great issues in Wake Forest is transportation and the clogging of the roads. And how do we make that situation better? How do we get the funds to do it with? And what do we do when we have the funds? It's not an easy issue. If population was stable and we were just building roads and finding money to build roads, we'd eventually catch up. But what is happening is that it's very difficult to build our way out of the congestion, because as we build new roads or improve the roads we have, more people are coming into Wake County all the time. So it's an ongoing process. I think that the mass transit, which is very popular with some and not so popular with others, really needs to be planned well and executed well. But I think the higher our population, the more likely that will be a great benefit to the region. So I think there probably will be multiple resources to pull from to make the pie large enough to be able to afford some of these improvements. And I look forward to finding what those ways are. I don't have all the answers. I probably never will have all the answers. But with the help of the public and those who are more specialized in different areas of the different issues, hopefully, collectively, we can go forward together. My door has always been open to the public in local government of the 14 years I've served on the council. And indeed, when I've been off the council, but I've still been involved very heavily in my community in various ways, my door has always been open to people. It's a people business. Public service is a people business. And we need to move together to achieve what collectively we think is the top priorities. And I'm willing to do that. I have mixed emotions on the death penalty. There are some horrendous crimes that where individuals have been absolutely positively identified as the perpetrator of the crime. And under that guidelines, I would have no problem in voting for the death penalty. What I think is the shortcoming of the system as we have it today, or we used to have it before it was put on hold, is that there are cases that have now been documented where individuals have been tried by jury and convicted of a horrendous crime and given the death penalty, and yet later have been exonerated by real either DNA or some other type of factual data that has come to light. So because of that possibility of putting to death an innocent person, I'm not sure in the final outcome how I would vote on that. That gives me great concern, because the death penalty obviously is final. And while I do believe in life after death, I don't think it's up to us to say when that death occurs. So I would have to continue to wrestle with that. Well, I think it could only help if we get the right leadership. One thing that I think as a citizen could be improved upon greatly is the 2-year terms. In local government, we have 4-year terms traditionally here in North Carolina. And I think that the 2-year terms for state legislators is too short, because after they serve 1 year, they're already thinking about running for re-election most of the time. And that means a tremendous amount of time and energy and money from all sources possible to get re-elected. So with that in mind, there's only half the time, half of the term, that we're really getting full attention to our needs and the policies to solve our issues and problems and concerns that we have as a society. So I think that they should have 4-year terms like local government in some manner, whether it's staggered terms or like we do in local government or not. But I think that the 2-year term is too short to get the meaningful legislation by informed legislative body to actually benefit the people. So I think the society and our public in North Carolina would benefit greatly by having 4-year terms, and I'd like to see that. I'm a very caring person. I've always thought that the person in front of me is as much, if not more so, important than I am. Every person, I believe, has their strengths and weaknesses, but I think too often we tend to prejudge somebody either by the color of their skin or their socioeconomic financial status or their education or lack thereof, or their religion, or, I mean, humans tend to stereotype people. They tend to rush to judgment to people, and I think that's wrong. So I've always taken a different approach. I was brought up by a mother who was born and raised in London, England, and met my dad during World War II. My mom was in the British Army and a sergeant. She was always a sergeant at 5'2", but she was definitely a sergeant. My dad was 6'2" and was an American soldier during World War II, and they met in London. And my mom had very definite ideas of what was right and wrong, especially. Of course, my dad did too, but my mom was the leader in the family. And as I have experienced life, I have become, I think, even more like my mom. But I don't prejudge anybody. I take them where I find them, how I find them, and look for the good in people. And I think that's what we need to do as a society. And if I can be a circle of influence anywhere, that's what I'd like people to take away from me. Well, in my life before campaigning, it was still busy. My husband has a job that he has different work hours, different days. And I always get up with him in the morning, no matter if it's 4:30 in the morning or 5:30 in the morning, to make sure he's all right and has breakfast and see him off. And then sometimes, if I'm able to, I go back to bed for a while. Have to get my beauty rest, you know, for the world outside. But typically Saturdays are either going to the different events at the state fairgrounds, since that's local to me. A lot of different events that I like to. I make jewelry, so I go to the bead shows and buy supplies, and I make real gemstone jewelry predominantly. And I'm very fashion oriented. I have a business partner with a company called Leather Wraps, and we import ladies' hand crocheted leather shawls from Ecuador. So that keeps me busy sometimes. And the predominant time on Saturday is when other people are available, so that's when we show our goods. So a lot of times I will do that. And other times I watch the at-home shopping networks if I'm able to put my feet up and have a good English hot cup of tea. And play with my 3 dogs that live with me in the house, along with my husband, of course, and one cat who adopted me, a calico. So that's pretty much typical of, and I do as little housework as I have to get by, because that's not what I enjoy doing. But of course, we all have to do those basic tasks as well. There's a lot of successful people, and success means different things to different people. Since I'm and have been active in the political arena for so many years, a rising star that has gone all the way to the top now is Secretary Hillary Clinton. I really admire her for many things. She has stuck by her family. She has stuck by her marriage. She has always reached out, my knowledge of her at least, to help others be successful also. She's very active in organizations that are worldwide organizations, humanitarian organizations. She's now a grandmother. I'm not there yet. I have two grown children, neither one married yet, a son and a daughter. So I'm looking forward to one day having grandchildren. But I think she's always positive, always is creative enough with her book writing and other parts of her life that she's touched and affected in a positive way so many lives that I think that would be a very positive individual to pattern oneself after. On the other hand, I'm a very independent-minded, thinking and acting person myself. So I have realized that as an individual, I'm the only one who's responsible for my actions, and I take full responsibility for anything I say and do. I really am pleased to be here today, and I'm very pleased to be able to connect with individuals who may consider voting for me November 4th or before. I have always been a registered Democrat. I cannot foresee me ever changing party affiliation. It was always very important as I was growing up and hearing my mom, who became a naturalized American citizen, that voting was the most important right and privilege that we have. And so I don't think I have ever missed voting when it was offered to the public, whether it's been just one person on the ballot or whether it's been the presidential election. I don't think I have ever missed in placing that vote. I consider that very, very important. The Democratic Party, to my way of thinking, has been much more of a people party, much more of, in recent times, in my generation, reaching out and caring about people. I generally do care about individuals in the world besides myself, and I actually look for ways to make their lives better that I might be able to provide. So I think there's much more of a caring, softer, let's do it together type attitude in the Democratic Party, and that's what keeps me within the Democratic Party.